Hi, my name is Aidan Collins. A few years ago, most GRC teams were debating whether to buy or to build. That conversation was usually around which platform to buy. AI has changed that conversation. Not because building suddenly becomes cheaper or easier. Building AI still requires investment, expertise, ongoing maintenance, and those costs can add up quickly. But what AI has done, it's lowered the barrier enough so that executives are now asking a few questions before they approve almost any purchase. Why can't we just build it ourselves? And that pressure has fundamentally changed how GRC teams evaluate new technology. The question is no longer simply, which platform should we buy? What should we build ourselves? What should we rely upon a platform for? And what should we build on top of that platform to solve the problems that are unique to our business? To dig into this today, I'm joined by two people who live that decision every day. First of all, from Guidewire is our colleague, Grace. Grace, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Grace Beeson. I'm the director of GRC at Guidewire Software. I've been with Guidewire for about 6 years. Prior to Guidewire, I was the director of GRC for HPE and DXC for our global customer base and our internal product base.
Thank you, Grace. We're also joined by Payam, and let me have Payam also introduce himself. Payam, tell us about yourself.
My name is Payam Tarvedi Nchechi. I've been a practitioner and a leader in the cybersecurity space for about 27 years. Currently the signature architect at Expedia Group.
Thanks, Payam. Grace, let's start with you. How has AI changed how you and your clients are thinking about GRC tools?
One of my team has coined the term expert in the loop. So we're liking to use our GRC functions not to look at how AI is going to replace us or any of our team. In fact, it's helping us to do more with the same number of folks with higher speed, more intelligence, and larger scan.
Thank you, Grace. Pam, I want to put the same question to you. How has AI changed how you and your team are thinking about GRC tools?
I think that's a great statement, Grace. I think it's allowed us to look at how we operationalize and how we leverage and kind of maximize output from our people. I think it's a very interesting time in a very long time in our space where we can take someone who's really good at doing something in our GRC space and have them just be an incredible contributor to not only operationalizing what we have, but really coming up with the next wave of the tooling that we need, the capabilities that we need. And it's been phenomenal to watch that.
Thanks, Payam. And you'll recall that actually a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this. In your role, you're often the executive at the table, mediating conversations about what an organization should build versus what it should buy. Have you found yourself considering building capabilities that a few years ago, perhaps, you simply would have bought?
Certainly. I mean, I think to the last point, yes, absolutely. It's a very attractive proposition for really anyone, right? You take the technology that's there, you take the people that you have, and you start to have very exotic thoughts about how you're going to be able to build things and how you're able to solve a lot of business challenges. Now, of course, there is that thought typically has its limits. So there is certainly, there are the limitations on what do you do when you go from 0 to 70% of this experiment you're doing? And then what does that last 30% look like? That last 30% when you build things is typically where the challenges come in, the sustainability of what you're building. The maintenance of what you're building, right? The evolution of your requirements have shifted, have evolved from day one, right, to day 30 even. And so there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of needs to have that evolve with that development that I think including myself, we forget at times because of that excitement that you have.
Thanks, Payam. And Grace, I want to ask the same question of you. And Your perspective, I think, here is particularly interesting because you live this from two angles. The internal work you do at Guidewire, and externally through the advisory work where you're helping your clients with their GRC tooling decisions. Have you found yourself considering building capabilities that a few years ago you'd have bought, either in your internal role or in the role that you have advising clients?
I think that the use of AI for build has been phenomenal. And my team at Guidewire, for example, I challenged them less than a year ago to find a way to have AI create their own agents within the tools that we use. And we have a suite of AI tools that we use, but within those tools to find a way to build agents that would help them with their work. What I didn't try to do is replace the tools that we already purchase. So we've got a GRC platform. We've got Anecdote, obviously, that we're using for, as I said earlier, for our proactive compliance controlling, testing, and our evidence control. I'm not looking to replace those platforms because, as Payam said, the evolution and the continued maintenance of those, a lot of these vendors, my pick has always been the vendors are looking at the next and greatest thing. I don't want a team of software developers. I've had that in the past. I don't want a team of software developers. I want a team of GRC experts. So what we're doing is we're actually using AI and we're doing a combination of buy versus build. So we're buying our basic platforms and a lot of the functionality they have, and then we're building additional functionality with AI to either support those platforms or work outside of those platforms that then is business centric. So we're able to then teach our AI agents the business that we're doing and our philosophies and our goals and our objectives for the year and how we use that, our taxonomy and our business operations. So we're using it for that.
Thank you, Grace. And Payam, I want to switch back to you. Grace gave us some really good examples there where building has genuinely made sense. You're a senior executive in the organization. You sit in these conversations with leadership. When you're in the room with those executives debating buy versus build, and specifically around questions related to GRC, how do you frame that conversation? And I'll say specifically, how do you make the case that the right path is often to buy something and then build on top of it?
That's a great question. I think it actually works really nicely with what Grace just said. And I really love hearing that. And I think the benefit comes really from when you're able to meet at that intersection between innovation and business value generation, right? And I think it's you take what you're trying to do as a business process, the value you're trying to achieve and deliver, and you then take the technology that may or may not exactly do what you're trying to achieve. Taking the tasks, taking the things that free up your individuals, free up their time and resources that they can then focus on other critical work that really helps the business move the needle. I think that's where the conversation really is going and has been for the last little bit, which is, look, we've all been very excited about AI. I don't know a single person who really hasn't been excited. But now we're starting to get to a point where that excitement, of course, comes with a heavy cost of AI utilization. And we're starting to look at everything that we do and how do we measure that value? How do we measure the actual outcome, the tangible item that we have? And is that really providing us the level of value that we're looking for? And I think that's really the conversation that we start to have. It's no longer about, that's great, everybody go do AI, use AI, think AI, breathe AI. It's more of, let's make sure whatever it is we're trying to do has longevity, make sure that it's surgical in the approach so that we're not being wasteful. But then also we're using AI to really augment, our weaknesses and help us accelerate achieving that end goal that we're trying to achieve, and which is always, I think, for us, generating that value for the business.
Great comments, Pam. And let me stay with you just to follow up on a couple of things that you said. Once you've made that case, how do you actually decide? What are the factors that determine what are the pieces that you build and what are the pieces that you buy?
That's a great question. I think that's going to differ between anyone you speak with. I think it has a lot to do with that the culture of the business and what you're doing from a leadership perspective. I think that aside, my motto has always been uh, build the thing that you're great at and it's aligned to your business and business values, right? And you'll hear that a lot from me. That business value is very critical. If you're in let's say travel, you don't want to build a ton of cybersecurity applications or compliance applications. But to Grace's point, there are things that you want to do that allows you to accelerate what you're doing and really vastly improve what you're doing, but you don't want to become a GRC vendor. You don't want to become a cybersecurity vendor, right? That's not our business. And so anytime I think typically you look at a buy versus build, there's that fundamental piece, but then there's also the longevity piece, the life cycle around it. Do we really need to build or buy, right? And for whatever reason you land on a build, you have to understand the mechanics that go behind that decision. You have to understand the resources and the decision and the cost that's going to take for you to maintain that application, maintain the longevity of it, and it has to be supported, right? You need people to support and keeping the lights on, and you need people that are going to be able to evolve that product or that solution for you. Because again, it's not a point in time where you go and say, I'm going to build this, and all of a sudden everything stops in the world. There's no further requirements, there's no further enhancements. And so now you have committed yourself into having to maintain, evolve, enhance this piece of solution where there is probably an army of people somewhere dedicated to just doing that.
Thanks, Payam. And Grace, let me pose a similar question to you then. And again, here I think is where your dual vantage point really shines. Between your internal role on the one hand and your advisory practice, how do you advise teams on how to draw that line, what to buy, what to build?
When you're making a decision on what you're going to build versus buy, that longevity that Pam was talking about, that's important. Where a lot of times we're looking at things that are around regulatory compliance and changes. And while we will stay abreast of that, if you're building it versus buying it, you're going to need to know how to factor that in. How do you govern that? How do you constantly, how are you orchestrating so that you're adapting to that and continually enhancing it? How are you keeping abreast of the new and greatest things that the vendor community is doing in the GRC world? So it may not be just the intelligence, it may be the functionality. And how do you stay abreast of that? That's why I like the idea of working with our vendor community for some base of the product, because they're aware of the things that from an orchestration perspective or a function perspective are important to us as consumers of the GRC products. On the other hand, there are things from our strategy, from my corporate strategy, from my business strategy, from my team strategy that are important to me that my vendors may not know. And so those are the types of things that we're looking to build. How do I support my strategy? How do I support my team? How do I support the day-to-day things that we're doing that can be done with less human interaction, with reducing some of the human error?
Thank you, Payam and Grace. Really appreciate your perspective today. Across the GRC teams we work with, we're seeing exactly that same shift that Grace and Payam described. The question is no longer build versus buy. It's what do you build, what do you buy, and increasingly what do you build on top of what you buy. Our perspective, honed from many conversations, is that platforms should handle the shared high-stakes foundation, the evidence layer, auditability, compliance logic, integrations, governance, so that teams can focus their engineering effort and their limited resources on the workflows, automations, and AI capabilities that actually differentiate their business. That's where we believe the future is headed. Not choosing between building and buying, but rather combining both in the right places. If you want a framework for thinking through where that line should sit for your organization, we've put together a decision guide. You'll find it on our website. Thank you for watching, and with that, back tomorrow.